Hey guys, Dwayne here. Today I want to talk a little bit about preparing for court and what you should think about and the approach you should take when you're dealing with a narcissist when you're going through a divorce. Now this question came in one of the comments, one of the videos. Someone had asked to talk specifically about it. I've talked a little bit about it in the past in some other videos, but I figured this would be a good opportunity to reattack or readdress this topic and talk about it in the context of some new things that we've learned and discussed in basically the last month. So anyways, the first thing you have to do whenever you're dealing with this is you have to recognize what you're actually dealing with. And what I mean by that is, if you're starting this out and or you have a strong suspicion that your ex has a personality disorder and you're getting ready to engage in this process with somebody like that, one, you're you are at an advantage because you know what you're dealing with and you know what you're getting yourself into. But then that leads to the question of okay, well, how can you use that knowledge to help you in the court system and with the judges and attorneys and stuff like that? And that's where it gets a little more complicated. So right off the bat, you have to go into this with a realistic view and realistic expectations. And the reason I say that is because all of this stuff is, for the most part, open to interpretation, and you're dealing with a legal system that has biases and different views of these type of things, and it really complicates what you can be successful in fighting and what you really have the ability to accomplish. Now, I guess one thing I could say right off the bat, if you have a ton of money and you could fight a lot and dedicate a lot of money to it, then you then you are at an advantage because, if you can outspend the other person, then you might just get them to give up. The problem is conversely, when that person on the other end of the thing is the narcissist and they're the ones who have more money and then they're able to utilize the court systems to basically punish you, it can also work to your disadvantage. Okay, so this rolls into the problem that I see with the court systems, and it's really kind of regionally specific. And what I mean by that is different courts, different judges, attorneys, custody evaluators, all those people and pieces and parts that are part of the system are going to have their own opinions and views and biases towards all this. Now, if you happen to be in an area where they recognize narcissistic abuse and borderline abuse and basically personality disorders, and if they recognize the damage that it creates to children, then you are in a good situation to where you can utilize some of this information to your advantage. The problem is, and this is where it gets kind of tough, is we've already talked about in other videos where the narcissist will actually accuse you of being the narcissist, and they're not going to sit idly by and just say, oh my God, I've been caught. They are going to fight tooth and nail to defend themselves and cast you as the same person. So you have to be realistic in going in this to think that if you go in and say, well, my ex-husband or my ex-wife is a covert narcissistic personality disordered person, undiagnosed, if you have a diagnosis and that can help you out, they're not going to just sit there and say, oh yeah, she caught me, it's true. It's not going to happen. So you have to keep that in mind, because they're going to turn around and they're going to basically pull out all the stops and come after you as well. So it's kind of like almost mutual assured destruction. Now, if you're in an area where the custody evaluators recognize this and can test for it and are willing to test for it and identify it, and if your attorney has the experience and has case studies where they've actually been successful, then that's a different story. The problem is, in most areas, that's really not the case. Okay, so your best bet when you're talking to your attorney, or you are interviewing attorneys, is to ask these specific questions. Ask them if they what's their experience with personality disorders, how a court normally looks at it, and see you've already self-educated yourself on a lot of these terms and topics and what goes on with a personality disorder. So you should be able to recognize rather quickly if they are saying the right words to demonstrate that they actually know what they're talking about. Now, my gut feeling on this, guys, and I mean, I only have the experience in my limited area and of the different people that I've spoken to throughout, the country and in other countries, but it's still a very small sampling group. And unfortunately, most of the information that I've received that's been shared with me is we are all basically in the same boat, meaning that for the most part, the courts don't really put a lot of clout in it. Now, and I know I've told you this, I know I have told this story before, I don't remember what video, but I'll mention it again. I have a friend of mine who, his son was going through a nasty divorce. They went through custody evaluators. They were in the process of going through another evaluation. The evaluator was basically saying, annotating all these things that were wrong with the mom, actually brought this person in to say, hey, you need to make sure your attorney's available. You probably need to make sure that the law enforcement is around because she's already demonstrated that she's emotionally unstable. And they thought, we got it. We're going to go into court. This is going to be perfect. They're going to switch the custody around and everything will be great. Guys, 6 months later, the guy has lost custody. He's a weekend dad because he had to move. They never did award him custody. They kept it as 50-50 and nothing changed. Okay? So, that goes back up to my realistic expectation comment from before. Just because, be very cautious going into this and be open-minded and realistic in what you think you can actually achieve. So even if you go to a custody evaluation and they are saying that they are identifying that your ex has a bona fide cluster B personality disorder, and if they even document that there are issues with the kids, do not count that. I mean, that's a victory. I mean, that's good news-ish, but do not just take to the bank thinking that you're going to win that, because all it takes is a skilled attorney to poke holes through that, to make excuses for it, and the court will either disregard it or they won't put as much weight into it. Okay, so that is really important to in going through this. I know it's not a good answer. I know this isn't what people would like to hear. They would like to hear that, narcissism and covert narcissism and borderline personality disorder and all these things are such recognized terms and in the mainstream and everyone understands them, that you're going to be able to bring these things up, point out evidence of how the person is basically emotionally abusive to yourself and to your kids, and they're going to, you will be victorious. The courts will see it. They will realize that, that they need to put limitations on the other parent. It's not going to happen. And to be perfectly honestly, guys, if that was the case and people were just able to make accusations, my ex was making all kinds of accusations about me, about being, violent, a danger to the kids, afraid I was going to hurt myself or hurt the kids. I mean, all this stuff. And if the judicial system would have believed it, I would have no custody of my kids. To be perfectly honest, when that first argument happened, where I was fighting for 50-50 and she was fighting for 80, basically 80-20 or every other weekend, saying that I was, a danger to the kids, the court increased my time. Now, they didn't give me 50-50, but they said, okay, they considered all of it BS. They didn't believe a lot of it, and I mean, there wasn't really any hard evidence to demonstrate anything. Thank God, because I probably would have lost my job as a result of that. But, and they said, okay, well, we're not going to give either party what they want, which they didn't. They didn't give her 80-20, and they didn't give me 50-50. They increased my time to like 70-30, maybe maybe a little bit more than that. But fundamentally, what I got was Thursday nights and Sunday nights, so that I had to take the kids to school, actually from my house, because at this point in time, I was actually getting up in the morning, going to the other house, picking the kids, driving them to school, dropping them off at school, and but it was deemed by the ex that it was inappropriate for them to go to school from my house because they didn't live there, they just visited. But that's a different argument altogether. All I'm trying to say is, even with all the shenanigans that were being said, they increased my time, to basically test the waters to make sure that I was actually able to do it, which I get that. I wasn't happy about it, but I understand it. And it slowly progressed after the custody evaluation and everything to 50-50. So I know I'm kind of talking in a circle in this, and unfortunately there's not really a great answer. Okay, however, there are things that you can do that we talked about previously in other videos that do help you. And the number one thing is controlling your responses. You have to control how you respond. You do not want to respond emotionally to these things. You don't want to be able to be gaslight, triggered, basically emotionally manipulated by your ex to do things to demonstrate or potentially demonstrate that you do have some type of problem and validate it. We talked about this in the video the other day, whereas if somebody is saying something about you or making lies about you or exaggerations, you have to make sure that you're not doing anything to fall into that and to validate what they're doing. So it's crucial to make sure that you're paying attention to what you're doing and you're not responding emotionally. You need to be rational and analytical, sterile in how you respond. Even if you are completely freaking out inside and you're completely stressed and whatever, you have to take a deep breath, keep calm, and be rational about everything that you're going through. It is critical in this. Okay, your best bet. All right, so and some advice that even though I basically have been giving not so great news, the one thing that really has the potential to kind of help you is a custody evaluation. That's the only thing you're going to get that is an unbiased review or evaluation of your parenting skills and your ex's parenting skills and how the environment is affecting the kids. Okay, the problem with that, like I said, you can't really take it to the bank that if they come back and say something negative about you or her that it's going to be a slam dunk. What you can gain from it, and I think, and this is my opinion, in my situation, because that evaluation did not demonstrate what she was saying about me, and technically they didn't validate what I was saying about her, I was going for 50-50. I was never going for full custody. Even though sometimes I think maybe I should have. But it basically the recommendation out of the report, after listening all the shenanigans from both of us and the issues and the plus and minuses, was 50-50. They had the visitation schedule I'm on is basically the visitation schedule that they recommended in the thing. And I was, when the report came out, I'm like, I'll accept it. Let's go for it. I agree with it. They played some games, so basically it was a modified version of that, but fundamentally we both agreed to follow the recommendations as listed in the custody evaluation. Okay, so the thing about a custody evaluation, like I said, they're going to check both places. A lot of these will actually have in-home visits where they'll do interviews with you, they'll do psychological testing, they'll observe how you interact with your children, how your ex interacts with the children, and make a determination on what's really going on. Again, like I said, just because they may identify something that's negative for you or negative for your ex doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to turn around and say that one person should have custody over the other. Now, if you have young kids, okay, so let's be perfectly honest on this. If I'm the working dad and my ex is a stay-at-home mom and I have toddlers and young kids that aren't in school, you're going to be hard, unless those kids are already in daycare or some type of plan system, you are in a huge disadvantage because you're going to disrupt the kid's routine, right? So if you have young toddlers and you're trying to say, well, I want 50-50 custody and I want to switch back and forth houses, you can try and it's a possibility, but you need to manage your expectations on that. Now, if your kids are older and are already in school, as in my case, all my kids were either in junior high or elementary, higher elementary school, that helped out because, they weren't in daycare. They didn't need to be in daycare. They were spending their time at school. My situation facilitated me being able to take them to school and pick them up and have care for them. So it was a workable solution. So, so I said that just because they side with you, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win. Now, it does give you negotiating power, right? I mean, it gets back into this this judicial theater I've talked about before. But if the custody evaluation does uphold some of your concerns and say that there are some issues with your ex, whether it's the mom or the dad, the one thing that does give your attorney the ability to utilize that negotiation to say, hey, if you really want to go this route and you want to go to court, then we're going to talk about this, 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 and this. And if your client is okay with bringing up these issues and going into more deep dive in these little areas that are potential concern, then we'll go that way. So it could help you settle, but at the end of the day, it's a long and involved process. Okay. Like I mentioned, in the custody evaluation, they do have the opportunity to do testing and the potential to identify personality disorders, but it's not guaranteed, right? Just because you say that the person is a narcissist or has narcissistic personality disorder or is comorbid with borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, doesn't mean that they're going to take it. They're going to just say, "Oh, okay. One, you're not an expert. You don't have a medical degree. You don't have you don't have the authority to diagnose somebody." And potentially, if you're saying, you got to be careful, because if you're saying that type of stuff, there's a potential that they think that you could be fabricating stories to try to manipulate your children and the situation against the ex. So be careful about that. All of this is a very complicated process. And finally, and I mentioned this earlier, your best bet is to find an attorney who is experienced in this type of situation and with this personality disorder, so they can give you realistic advice on what your expectations are, what the court typically how they view the situation, and that could differ between courts and judges. Okay, what I mean is, like, typically a court could be very receptive to it, but of that court, maybe 5 of the judges, 4 of them believe it, and 1 of them thinks it's a load of garbage, right? So it's all personality driven. Bottom line is, your best bet is to remain rational and get your emotion out of it, so that you at least look like you're coming across as calm, cool, and collected and reasonable, with reasonable expectations, and not just that you're out there trying to paint the other person as a monster that shouldn't be around their kids. I mean, even if you believe it, and I mean, guys, I'm with you on this, but you got to be careful, because if you start trying to spin that web, that yarn, it's highly possible that it's like mutual assured destruction, and your credibility can be diminished, and the court and the judge may think that you are just as much at fault as the other person. Okay? All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. I know this message isn't really a great message. I really wish I could tell you, follow these 5 simple steps, and the court will absolutely agree that your ex and the parent of the other parent of your children is a cluster B personality disordered person who is dangerous to have around the kids, who's unable to set boundaries, who's unable to follow up with homework and grooming, bathing and all that kind of stuff. Guys, unfortunately, it really doesn't work that way unless you can really fight hard and you have the money and the resources to do it. But you're talking a ton of money. My situation, where I had basically one real court date, a custody evaluation, and a bunch of back and forth and a bunch of extensions until we finally settled, that was $28,000 worth of stuff just on my side. Okay, and that wasn't. I mean, every time you go to court, that's a huge amount of money. So these things can add up really quick. Now, if I had the money and I had the resources and I could have done it, I probably would have. Now, but the problem is, at the end of the day, what is the ramification with your kids too? Because if you're able to win something like that, the other person, when they do get to see their kids, isn't going to say, isn't going to be all joy, happy, and that they're already a narcissistic personality type, darn good and well, that they are going to say things, and it is super easy to say, mommy or daddy manipulated the system. They were able to outspend me, and now I can't see you because they lied to everyone and said that I'm a bad person. Okay, so now that you have a perfect wedge, or they have a perfect wedge to stick right between, to use with your kids to fight you. I mean, even if you win something like this, I mean, guys, okay, honestly, there's no winning in this. This is a nasty mess that just continues to go, and all you can really do is you can do the best job that you can to mitigate what the other person is doing. Okay? I mean, if they bail, if they turn around and they just leave, you have a great, then not a great situation, but you're at a significant advantage, because that parent left. You're not to blame for it. You basically get the kids, and you move on from there. And one thing I will say before I completely finish this is, typically if you're dealing with a narcissist, unless they are the person getting the money from the kids, so if they have their job or whatever, and they're just fighting, and they really are a narcissist, and they really don't care about anyone other than themselves, more than likely they're going to, after this is over and they've driven you into the ground, they will basically say that the kids need to stay with you anyways. Okay? Now, if you are the breadwinner and that person is a stay-at-home, that ain't going to happen. They will burn the place to the ground before they give the kids up, because they are their checkbook. They are their retirement plan for a significant amount of time, and they know that if they lose anything with those kids, that it affects their paycheck. Guys, that's just the reality of it. Okay, so hey, if some of you guys out there have had experiences where the courts have recognized narcissism and it has benefited you, please leave it in the comments below, because I personally haven't heard from it, and the people who have reached out to me thus far have all basically said the same message, that it hasn't necessarily helped them significantly during their court thing. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like this channel and it's helping you out, please subscribe. And if you know somebody else who's going through this, who might benefit from this topic, please share it with them. We can get the word out more and maybe help people be able to deal with this better. And on that, I will talk to you guys on the next video. Take care. Bye.